Hey guys, welcome back to the Anime Collector. We're having an impromptu discussion tonight about Clannad and Ichi the Killer. And I want to know, Duo, since you just literally a few minutes ago finished Ichi the Killer, do you want to talk about that first?
I'm good with either, whichever one you want to start with. But obviously, since it's still fresh, I'd probably prefer to go with Ichi the Killer.
Sure. Let's do that then. What did you think of it?
Okay, so firstly, with this kind of thing, with horror in general, it's never really like I enjoy it necessarily. It's kind of just I want to see how far it can go to make me uncomfortable, and this one definitely did it a lot.
Gonna give people a visual reference of what movie we're talking about.
Yeah, it's so the version I watched was dubbed.
Yeah.
The worst part about it is I can't tell whether it was like Americans trying to do a horrible impression of what Japanese people would sound like speaking English, or Japanese people trying to speak English and not doing very well at it.
So it's literally been, oh God, 7 or 8 years since I've watched this. I think that probably what was going on is that because it's sort of following the mob bosses and the Yakuza, they have a sort of tough guy way of talking that Americans don't talk like that when they're acting tough. They do that kind of like the stink eye and like the it ain't no big deal kind of like, they just sort of they talk in a way where it's a little bit I don't know. I feel like I remember when I started watching it, starting with the dub and immediately turning it off and switching to the sub form. So I imagine that that's what was going on, is that there's a lot of just weird stuff. In fact, didn't Kakihara have like a Australian accent or something?
It was close to that. The funny thing is I didn't have a choice because the version I got was just the dub. So I was like,
that's fine.
Well, I guess we're sitting through this. And after like 20 minutes, I got used to it. It was like, okay, yeah. I've gotten used to the fucking English. But
it was the offer sometimes. I'll send you a copy of the Blu-ray if you want it.
I'm gonna be frank. I don't know if I'm gonna want to watch this again.
Well, also the Blu-ray, the DVD that I have actually says uncut special edition on top. I don't know that the Blu-ray is the uncut version. So should we give people an idea for whoever is watching that they may not know what the premise of this is? Should I illuminate them?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Now you tell me, because it's been years since I've watched it. You tell me if I'm off base anywhere. Ichi the Killer is a story where literally every single character who has dialogue, like every character that talks, is like not a background character, and even some of the background characters, but every character that has dialogue is a sadomasochist. That's fair to say, yes?
Yeah.
Every single character gets off on being hurt and hurting other people. So much so that the way that they open up the movie in order to tell you the title of the film is that Ichi, who is not this guy, this is Kakihara, much more interesting character. Ichi's like not on any of the DVDs.
Yeah.
Ichi, okay, so here's Ichi right here. This is Ichi. Ichi witnesses a mob boss, or like a mobster, beating up his girlfriend, like brutally beating her. Like her face is just messed up when you get to see like what she looks like. He's watching from the balcony, and then eventually goes in, and he has like this bladed like shoe. He's got a shoe with like a blade on the heel, and he literally brings his foot up and just like slams it down and cuts the guy in half, right? But we learn that Ichi was jerking it on the balcony, and you see the camera pans down on this jizz on the plant that is dripping into a puddle, and then the title Koroshia Ichi, or Ichi the Killer, like it forms in the puddle of jizz. That's the movie. Okay, that is the opening to the movie, and that's basically all you need to know about the setting and feel of this film. And you could take it a step further, as I just let Duo know that behind the scenes, that puddle of jizz is real. Apparently, Takashi Miike, or the director, Takashi Miike, actually passed around a bucket in order to, because I think, if I remember the story correctly, a crew member contributed, and it wasn't nearly enough to achieve the shot, so he had to pass the bucket around to the whole crew.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
That funny thing is, I was gonna take a picture of the title card whenever it popped up to show you that I was watching it, but when that popped up, I'm like, I'm not taking a picture of that. It's gross.
Yeah. So, and just to clarify, what's actually happened here is that during the Gunsmith Cat stream, where we were seeing how long it would take for that to get funded, I told Duo that I would finally sit down and watch Clannad. And I did. I finished it this morning, and as payment for that, I made him watch Ichi the Killer. So that's where this whole discussion is coming from. So anyway, yeah. So when I first watched Ichi the Killer, and this I've said this countless times on the channel, but the thing about Ichi the Killer is that you really don't want to see any of the stuff that they're showing you. It's incredibly horrifying, and the soundtrack alone, I literally, right before this call, I was doing a conference call with some business partners, and I got on the topic of Ichi the Killer because your tweets were popping up on my phone, or your direct messages to me about it, and I just brought it up, and I was talking to him about it, and I made him listen to the opening track to the soundtrack, and he couldn't get through like the first minute or the first 30 seconds of it because it's so incredibly off-putting. They do this thing where they literally have like the sound like fades into one ear and out the other, and it feels like you're in a whirlwind, and it's got like little birds chirping and this like really high pitch like elongated noise, and like this drum, and it feels like when you just listen to the soundtrack, put the headphones in, close your eyes, and at a certain point, you're going to be convinced that somebody's behind you and they're about to start strangling you. It's such a bizarre experience. And like the music sets the tone for the whole movie. And the movie itself is so incredibly grossly violent. Like people's faces get cut off and like flung up against a wall. They have this tracking shot where the face hits the wall upside down, and it pans down as the face is sliding with the blood like holding it on the wall, and it turns around, and it's like just masterfully, artfully done for some of the most gross stuff you're ever going to see. And the way that I sort of describe it is you look away, and then this isn't something that necessarily they actually do, but it's sort of the feeling gives off to you is that most horror movies and stuff, when it gets to the point where it's too much, the camera cuts away, and then you get to take that deep breath, right? And that's the cathartic aspect of it. In Ichi the Killer, it's like they show you something you don't want to see, and they're really pushing your buttons. Then they cut away, you take that deep breath, and then they cut back, right? That's what it feels like when you're watching it. And what happened for me is when I got to the end credits, like I was literally throughout the whole movie, the only other movie I've ever seen that has made me feel the way that this movie made me feel was the one scene in American History X with the curb stomping. It's the one other time I've ever been like I can't watch this. Like I literally want to cover my eyes, right? Then when the credits rolled in Ichi the Killer, I immediately hopped on my computer to find out if there was any other movies, because for whatever reason, as awful, it's like getting raped for 2.5 hours. And the way I kind of describe it is like, and actually it's funny because this is actually the way I was talking to during my conference call about Clannad, where I said it's like getting super beat up, like somebody holds you in a dungeon and they're beating the crap out of you day after day after day after day, and then and they're like starving you and whatnot, and then they offer you a tiny little bit of kindness, and it's like, in reality, you're like, F no, get away from me. You've been beating me. I don't even like, you spit on it and throw it on the ground. But it's like, in reality, you're so beaten up and just tortured that you jump on it, and you're so grateful for like the dog food they slopped in the bowl because you haven't eaten in a week. You know what I mean? That's both Ichi the Killer it's like getting raped for 2.5 hours, and then as soon as the credits roll, it's like, okay, how do I get more of this? Is the feeling I had with Clannad. It's kind of like they have that ending, which we'll talk about, and if you guys haven't seen it, like fair warning now, when we get into the discussion on Clannad, it will ruin your experience of watching it, and is worth it. So I just want to get about that. But what would you say? Like, are these accurate descriptions of Ichi the Killer and all that?
Yeah, it definitely was. Although my experience with it was kind of different, I guess, in a certain way. So the beginning of the film, I think, was way more screwed up than the last chunk of it. I think the film hit its peak in terms of bothering me with that one scene where the guy wakes up and there's just hooks all in his body, and he's hanging from the ceiling and stuff like that, and the guy starts dumping hot oil on him. Like, that was the point where I'm like, okay, I don't want to see this anymore. This is really gross.
Like that scene right there. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's not even the worst scene.
Like, to me, it was. That was that
scene,
was like the moment.
Yeah, the scene that had a lasting impact on me, and I wasn't sure if you were going to see this because I didn't know if it was exclusive to the uncut version, which was this DVD. But there's a scene where, and like, I don't even want to talk about it. It's so horrifying reliving it, where they have like a girl's nipples tied on these strings, and they take a knife and cut that. That was so awful. I cringe right now thinking about it. Like, just that scene ruined me.
That didn't actually bother me as much because there are very specific things that will get me, and I'm aware of them completely. That hook thing was the exact kind of stuff.
Needles and hooks, yeah. Okay. I can get that. Yeah, when I first saw this, my friend Andrew, he has a thing with needles, and he, because of the back cover, refused to watch it no matter how much I prodded him because of that scene. So I get where you're coming from.
It's like that's the thing. It was after that point, because I've seen some pretty screwed up gore stuff in films, and it's like after that point, a lot of it was just like, I'm like, oh, like, okay, let's see what he's gonna do, and oh, he just chopped him in half, or like, oh, this guy's face got cut off. I'm like, that's hilarious. It's amazing.
It's actually pretty tame if you think about it. Like, I've seen other things that are handled in different ways that it's more off-putting, but the thing about it that's so bad for me was how much the characters were enjoying what they were doing.
Yeah,
they were. See, because when you watch Saw, you're watching the traps and things happen to somebody, and there's not really a person there literally like jerking off on the balcony, right? There's Jigsaw with like the tape recorder and stuff, but there isn't somebody there enjoying it. That's the thing that I think really makes, because the violence in Saw and like some of the stuff is really brutal, and it gives off a very similar kind of feeling. But with this, it's like that enjoyment it's like staring into the darkness, and the darkness stares back at you kind of feeling. That was awful. Like, that's what really sets off the uneasiness, and also the soundtrack, which again I can't say enough about. It's just I have tried to listen to the soundtrack just on its own, and I can't get past like the first 2 tracks because it's so off-putting that you just can't get through it. It's kind of similar to the Akira soundtrack, if you've ever heard that, which has,
that one's bizarre.
It's bizarre, but it's not like it. This soundtrack is aggressive, like it's coming to get you. That's what's so bizarre and off-putting about it. And also, I do want to mention there is a prequel movie.
Yeah, I may or may not watch it.
Well, I'll just say it's not nearly as violent and disgusting as Ichi the Killer. It's not nearly as good either, but it's funny as hell. It's funny as hell because the same actor is playing Ichi, this old ass guy. Years after this is made, they got the same actor to come back and play Ichi in high school.
Oh my gosh.
And it's so funny. Yeah, it's so funny because he there's lines like, for instance, this is about him discovering his sadomasochism, right? And oh shoot, yeah, I should actually. Sorry, my Augie was telling me I should direct message FDD&M because he's seen Clannad, and he would probably want to. We would want to get this discussion out. We would want to get this discussion out now because Augie hasn't seen it. He doesn't want us to go over it on the podcast. Yeah, so let me just send that link out right now in case.
I'm gonna tweet out that we're streaming since I feel like that'd be a good idea. But yeah, so it's just like it's kind of just weird because the film's audio I think was actually well done. Like you mentioned it several times, but it's like horror. It is vital that you get the audio correct. But I'm gonna agree with you. I think the most screwed up thing about the film was just that the characters were enjoying it. Like they're usually in these kind of films, if somebody's watching this stuff happen, they're horrified. But no, they're just like, oh yeah, this is great. I'm gonna go over and start freaking. I'm gonna like, oh my gosh, they're like, oh, I'm just gonna put these hooks in this guy. Yeah. And people are just like watching this. I'm like, how could you sit there and actually watch this under any circumstances? I guess I watched the film, right. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, but I know what you mean. Like if somebody was torturing somebody, you would not want to have to be in the same room, even if you were on the team of the person committing the torture. You know what I mean? Like if you were rival gangs or something. I get what you mean. Also, I want to finish up real quick a little spiel on this. That's about how it's worth seeing, mostly because of how funny it is. But there's a scene in this because it's about Ichi discovering his sadomasochism, and there's a scene in this where he's at like the karate dojo and he's like committed a lot of violence throughout the day, doing the training or whatever. And there's a point where the karate instructor guy like walks in on him, and I can't remember if he's not wearing pants. I think he's in a karate gi with just the belt and the top part. And there's this line where the karate instructor is like the shot is up close. I think you see like Ichi's ass, and then like way out, like in the distance, you see the karate instructor, and he's like, "Why is your willy out?" Like, right. And then at the end is so funny because when Ichi finally uses his drop kick move and kills this guy, I'm not even kidding. The camera goes from his face and he goes, and then it shoots down to his crotch. His pants unzip and a beam of light, like a rainbow, shoots out.
Oh,
and that's how they end the movie.
Dude, that's amazing. Oh, yeah. Dude.
Oh, man, also, I'll mention there's also an anime. The anime is garbage because the most interesting character in the Ichi the Killer series is Kakihara. They kill him in like the first 5 minutes in the anime. Lame.
By the way, he was terrifying. Like most of the time when like the main character, I'm rooting for them to get the killer, but in this case, I'm like, I kind of hope he dies because he did more screwed up stuff in some regards than Ichi the Killer actually did.
Yeah, way more. I mean, he cuts off his own tongue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that scene also did screw me up a little bit just because it prolongs the scene.
Yeah.
Like it makes you watch through the entire process of it.
Yeah,
and it's just like that was screwed up. But it's just like the problem is they have all this crazy stuff in the first half of the film. And then in the second half of the film, they just stop doing that. By the way, there's this one scene with a girl with her leg cut off, and it's like about as far as they go.
Yeah. Oh God. Like I said, it's been like 7 years since I've watched this movie. So you're my stomach is turning, remembering some of the scenes you're bringing up. But this actor, by the way, is in Thor. He's the Asian guy that fights alongside Thor with his like the girl and like the other two guys or whatever. Yeah. So I mean, he's been in a lot of stuff, and I'm just saying like he's a really good actor. In fact, after I saw this movie, I picked up a bunch of movies he's been in. There's one he did called it's called Shark Skin Man and Peach Hip Girl. I think that's what it's called. It's got a really bizarre name. That's another good one. It's not nearly Ichi the Killer's the best one, obviously, but yeah. Ooh, yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what else there is to say about Ichi the Killer, other than reminiscing on how great it is. There's literally a scene in it where this guy here, and he stands up, and apparently, like he just looks like this dumpy, like the stereotypical old Asian guy. And then he takes off his jacket and he's Master Roshi ripped.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And the way that they achieved this shot, it's literally a cardboard cutout of the guy's face on top of a bodybuilder's body. I mean, it is like Game of Thrones after Bruce Lee died, and it's the same technique, and it's so bad. and it just like the best way.
It was that was a great scene. I do want to mention to something. Ichi's facial reactions were terrifying in like the weirdest way. Like there's that one scene where the girl goes to his house acting like she's the girl who got raped that he saw, and like, oh, I want somebody to cut my toes off and then cut my feet off. And his face is just, he gets this like half smile thing, and I'm just like, Ichi, please, no, don't. Like, please just leave or something. I don't want to see that. I'm actually disappointed though, because he didn't do that. He just cut her leg off, and then the scene cut away. But
that is the girl that he cuts the leg off of. Yeah. Oh. Whew.
I would have rather him actually like try it, at least like go a little farther though. You know, like actually cut her toes off first. You know, and then like slowly but surely do that. You know.
Well, but see, the thing is, I think
like, let's keep doing it.
The difference is that they're showing you the level of control that Ichi has versus Kakihara.
Because I know.
Kakihara actually, see, the thing about Kakihara, which is I think his redeeming quality, is that he is a bludgeoning sadomasochist instead of like the cutting. I couldn't take that. I mean, yeah, he cuts off his own tongue, so to speak, but he insinuates it'll grow back. It's kind of a bizarre scene, but his thing is more like bludgeoning and whatnot, and I think that's easier. It's weird to root for any of these characters, but it's easier to be on his side than Ichi's side, because I'm the dismemberment stuff really gets to me, you know. But shoot, I was gonna say something and I totally lost track of my thought. No, I lost it. Dang it. But yeah, oh, we're all right. Yeah, there's a scene. There's a scene with that guy. I don't know how it goes in the English dub, but he's really horny, and he's just like he's laying in bed, and then all of a sudden he's just doing this thing where he's throwing his hands and feet over. He's like, I want to f, you know. And then he sees Kakihara in the alleyway, and he goes to punch. Like Kakihara takes out the piercings, because the thing about Kakihara, by the way, just for anybody who didn't, is that he's got like a Joker style cut across his mouth. So at one point he takes out the piercings, and the guy goes to punch him, and he punches him in the mouth, and his mouth opens, right, like Devilman style, and he gets the guy's hand in his mouth, and then the guy tries to get his hand free, and he kicks Kakihara, which rips the flesh off of his hand, exposing the bones and stuff. That scene, for college acting class, I reenacted that scene with my acting partner in both English and Japanese. That was actually like that. It was probably the year that I watched the movie the first time. But yeah, we didn't want to do a big scene. Like people were doing like Glengarry, Glen Ross, like entire long dialogue scenes, and we got away with doing a ridiculously short scene because we did it in English and in Japanese.
Oh man!
And it was that particular scene. So.
That was a little bit screwed up, just because, like, you know, I saw the cuts on his mouth. I'm like, oh boy, at some point that's gonna be addressed. When he took him, I'm like, oh boy, you better run, like you better run now. And he didn't. He just tried to punch him, and it's like, well,
when he first shows up on the in the movie, he's investigating like a kill scene. like trying to figure out what happened there. And he takes a cigarette, he puts it to his lips, and then he exhales the smoke through the sides of the slits in his mouth.
That was really gross. That was like a really gross way to start the film.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know, it's just like hilarious because because I got the tweet, I woke up to your tweet actually in the morning, and I looked at your tweet, and you described it as torture, basically, almost like Clannad. And so I go to watch this film, and I'm like, wow, this is like a different kind of torture entirely, actually. Instead of emotional, it's just making me watch like almost torture porn, pretty much. In fact, at times it basically was that, like the nipple scene.
Yeah.
That was also that one was so confusing because it was just like he just did it. I'm like, why? What was the purpose of it? Like, why'd you need to do it?
So my description that it's like they'll cut away and then cut back. It's because that particular scene just shows up out of nowhere, and it's like, I wasn't prepared for this. It just shows up and then it's over. Like, why?
It was just like half the time characters do things in the film. I'm just like, wait, why'd you do that? You didn't need to do that. It's like. Also, I thought it was funny at the end when the kid's dad dies and he starts kicking Ichi, and then the thing cuts to the main character, and it cuts back to Ichi. The kid's just dead over there with his head off, and I'm just like, okay, I guess he's dead. Like, I don't know why. That's just like that kind of stuff made me laugh every time it happened. Like I'm like, oh yeah, he's dead.
Did I mention the tweet on Clannad? Did I describe that yet? Because I just told it to somebody else, and I don't know if it's made its way through to this stream yet. Did I talk about it?
I don't know if you mentioned exactly what you said in the tweet. You said something.
I've got it right here.
But
I did say something different. Okay, so I did mention it. Yeah, I'll just reread the tweet so it's clear. I said, Clannad is a show that rips your heart out, holds it in front of your face for a few episodes, then crushes it in a fist, spattering your own blood on you, and then it reaches into its fanny pack and pulls out a fresh new heart that it sews into your chest.
Yeah, that's Clannad. Man. Whereas Ichi the Killer is just like getting stabbed randomly for like 2 hours straight, with nothing fun happening really the entire time. It's just a bunch of uncomfortable stabbing.
Well, I guess you could say that what Ichi the Killer does to your gut, what Clannad does to your heart.
That is true, at least for the first half. After that, I feel like the gore got a little bit lackluster.
You got a little desensitized to it, yeah.
Well, it's like I've seen so much stuff at this point that it's like you have to really do something screwed up, or you have to cater specifically to what I don't like to mess me up in any way. Yeah. And so it's like with this film, it did that right at the beginning, and then just didn't do it again. Like I was waiting for I guess there was that one scene with the guy who, like, he threw the needles in the guy's head, and that was a little bit screwed up. I was like, okay, that's a little gross, but like I think even then it wasn't as bad as the hook scene.
Right. I think that the soundtrack actually contributes partially to that feeling, because there is a chunk of the soundtrack that is it feels like they're going a little bit easier on you than in terms of like the visceral. Let me put it this way: if I was torturing prisoners at Guantanamo Bay and interrogating people, like, that came out that they would play like I forget who it was, maybe Miley Cyrus or whatever. They would just play it on blast on repeat. I would use this soundtrack. I would break them in with this soundtrack. But yeah, I think that there is a chunk in the middle where it's a little bit less brutal in terms of like just the assault on your senses that it's thrown at you. And I think that that it helps a lot to make the middle a little bit less bad. But I also think that there's a calibration that your body kind of does, because the beginning does throw a lot at you. And then after the tongue cutting scene, I feel like, or maybe by the needle scene with the hooks, that maybe by that time you're sort of calibrated. And like the movie, I guess can't really just be constant, I don't know. I feel like I'm trying to defend it, but I think that the choice to make the movie the way they did was actually the right choice. That not having it just be a constant gore fest is what sort of distinguishes it from movies like maybe I don't know, like Saw or something like that, where it's just all about like how gross can we make this. I don't even think Saw is a good example, actually. I mean, I think Saw has a lot more story to it than I think that the gore, for the most part, at least in the first and some of the later movies, is more about enhancing the storytelling aspect. But I'm sure I could think of another movie where it's just like it's gruesomely violent for violence sake. Like maybe the remake of Evil Dead or something, you know, where it's just like it's just that's hard to watch in different ways. You know what I mean? But I think that with Ichi the Killer, like what you're talking about, is that because there's I feel like what they do is they assault you. Like it's literally just like a full-on assault at the beginning. And then there's a middle part where they're like, okay, there's a little bit of storytelling that has to happen here. And then at the end, they wrap it up in such a bizarre way, like you said, where they don't show, there's so much that they stop showing you towards the end. It just gets bizarre. It's so bizarre. And I think that partially why is that it's playing with your senses, because it's kind of the thing I talked about looking away and then having them cut away and cut back, is that they start to regain your trust in the middle by making it a little bit toned down so that it's more impactful when they bring it back up later, because you sort of drop your guard, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, you want to jump on to Clannad? Do we have anything else we want to say about Ichi?
I want to say one last thing, I guess. The problem with this film that it inevitably was going to face is that gore fest horror is very difficult to tell stories with. Because when you watch this kind of film, you're in it to watch the gore. So when it finally slows down to tell you some story, you're going to go, okay, well, this is boring now, because you just showed me some guy getting his face cut off, and now you're going to sit there and try and have me sit through like 10 minutes of nothing. It's, and that was I think was the problem with this film for me. It's just like the beginning was really fun, and then I just started to trail off, and the ending was also just kind of bad to me, I guess. Like it also didn't help that the dub got really bad at that point, but it just ended. It was just like, I guess everybody's dead. Okay.
This movie, by the way, came out in 2001.
Yeah, I could tell.
Yeah.
The effects when they used them were a little cringy. That one time when the guy got cut in half, it was just like, all right, okay, this is early 2000s. Like
splits apart, and it's like, it was really good for its time. I'll say that much. But you're right. I'm really dying to sit down now that you've rewatched it and sort of reignited my. Since you've watched it and sort of reignited, I'm excited to sit down and watch the Blu-ray and see how bad the effects look in high res. But we'll see. Well, that'll be another time. But yeah, so I totally agree. I think it's. Are you? Let me ask you this question. Are you satisfied with having had the experience, though?
Like, worth watching? Yeah. If I was going to recommend it to somebody, I'd pretty much tell them, so like, you want to watch an hour of gore and then kind of just get bored for an hour? Because like that's all it was for me. It's just like, it was really fun in the beginning, and it got dull. And so it's just like, I think it was worth watching just because I could talk about it, I guess, with you. Automatically it makes it like slightly more worth it. But rating it, like actually reviewing the film, it was score for me, because I feel like it does one thing really well and then just kind of does everything else mediocre to bland, pretty much. And that's the problem. It either needed to only rely on the gore, or it needed to step up the storytelling. And to be fair, if I'd watched the sub, it probably would have been better, because the dub made a lot of the moments really cringy. But regardless, I don't think it would have ever been able to really. I don't think it could have matched. Actually, there aren't many good gore fest films I've watched, but like, I'd rather watch a Saw movie, for example, because I feel like those remain interesting the whole time. And even though they will occasionally go farther,
because there's mystery. Like, that's actually I think the difference, though, is that what's that guy's name? J.J. Abrams has this thing he calls the mystery box, and he says that when it comes to storytelling, and this was his entire premise on Lost, is that you got to keep putting things in that mystery box because that keeps the audience hooked in, right? So every step of the way, there's something that's either contributing to unraveling the mystery or it's making the mystery even more mysterious, and you just keep adding things into that mystery box. And I think that that's what Saw has, is that there's all this violence and stuff that's putting you in this kind of hyper aware state, but then they're also telling you a story that has a lot of mystery to it and a lot of intrigue to it, and then it has a payoff at the end that is really incredibly well done. And like I actually saw the ending to Saw coming, and I still really enjoyed it when it happened. You know what I mean? Yeah. They built it up so strong. In fact, I think that that the absolute most terrifying point in the Saw movie is actually the part where the guy's face is seen after they're like putting the kid to bed, and then you see the guy's face in the closet. That scared the shit out of me for the longest time. Yeah. Oh my God, just that one scene. So yeah, I get where you're coming from. That I think that, like I said, it's from 2001. But it's like I can't think of any other movie that comes close to doing what it did, and it's like a product of like, you can only kind of like, it's an idea that you can only do once, and whoever wants to take the torch from there is just going to fail, because you can't keep doing it, you know. So, anyway,
yeah. So you want to move on to Clannad then?
Yeah, let's move into Clannad. So why don't you why don't you sort of pitch that, since I sort of pitched Ichi the Killer and whatnot.
Okay, well,
like, what do you want to discuss about Clannad?
So I'm just gonna warn anybody, if you're in the chat and you have not watched Clannad, do not listen to the rest of this until you've watched it. Especially with After Story. While you can still get impact from it, I think the show is much better watched without any knowledge of what it is.
Yeah.
Because, like, for example, Mr. Nice Guy has already been spoiled for everything in Clannad, and I feel like you wouldn't enjoy it as much, because once you know what's going to happen, it's harder to enjoy it in the way that's that's best. So I'm just warning now. So I'm gonna actually go into it now.
I'll also say that if you do choose to watch it, the movie is technically first. Don't watch it first. Don't watch the movie.
Last. It's bad. The
movie's watch bad. The movie last if you're going to watch it at all.
Yeah, it's bad. So go ahead. So Clannad is an anime from a Kyoto Animation. It is based off a visual novel, and the premise of it, essentially, it's a romance anime where this guy named Tomoya, over the course of 24 episodes, it's very long actually for the first season, will slowly fall in love with this girl named Nagisa. There's a lot of hijinks and stuff like that. But the show doesn't really get super strong until the second half, where, unlike most romance anime, it decides to show life after high school. They actually get married. They have like a house. They have a kid. Stuff happens after that. It's not, we'll talk about it in a bit. But, like, the anime is this kind of magical thing where it's not just they kiss and it ends. You get to see everything after that. And because the relationship is so well made and so built up over the course of the first season, it makes not only the entire show just a joy to watch, but it makes some parts of the show later absolutely destructive and horrible.
Yeah, it's brutal.
And depressing. Yeah, it's... So
let me put this into perspective, because that's actually, you brought up a point that I would have forgotten to talk about, and I think that this is, I can crystallize this perfectly. Clannad is a harem, but not in the usual sense. By the way, the first episode is actually only 23 episodes, and then there's a OVA that is included, at least on the on the DVD that makes it 24 episodes, where they actually do an alternate look. It's like an alternate universe version, because like I said, it is a harem. So he gets together with Nagisa, and then the last episode is like, what if he had gotten together with Tomoya, or his name's
Tomoyo.
Tomoyo. Yeah, the names, the choice of names was not a good idea, and also the English dub for Clannad is phenomenal, but whoever at Sentai is in charge of telling them how to pronounce Japanese names needs to be fired, because that was awful.
I watched a little bit of it, and I heard Nagisa, and I'm like, okay, no.
Yeah.
I can't stand that.
Well, let me explain real quick, though, regarding what makes this different in terms of harem and whatnot. Is I have this thing, the worst. I'm going to go to the extreme because it'll get the point across. The worst example. I absolutely hate the show Oh My Goddess. I hate it. The sappy relationship. I already forget the guy's name, but the guy and Belle Dandy together. I hate that, because that show is just constant manufactured drama about crap that doesn't matter, and they don't address any conflicts that actual people suffer through in relationships. The thing that's different about Clannad is that not only is the character actually a character that you could understand why this group of girls would actually be interested in him, because he does have character traits that would be attractive in real life to women. Unlike half the other harems where there's no reason for the guy to be liked. It's like they make the harem for those neat guys like the character in the show to feel like there's a possibility that they might have girls actually interested in them, so to speak, right? So the difference here is that the character actually does have a lot of redeeming qualities, even though he is a bit of a delinquent and he plays tricks on people constantly. He's kind of like Jim in The Office in a way.
Yeah, that is
sort of like the teasing stuff, and that's actually really interesting, because in the same way, Jim from The Office is a really, like, you could see why people gravitate to that person. And in fact, in the last season of The Office, when the doc finally airs, and they do that scene where they sort of have like a discussion with the viewers, like the fans of the show, like the women are throwing themselves at Jim. It's kind of that idea. Like, so that's sort of what's going on with the character in this, where he's written very well, where he has a lot of admirable qualities, but he still has a goofy trickster side to him, right? And in addition to that, and this really, Clannad, the main show, takes place entirely during the high school years, and it's basically just a high school show. There's not anything really sentimental other than the Fuko arc, which I thought was the best arc of the first season. Yeah. So there, then in Clannad After Story, and this, I don't know if they did this intentionally, but this hit me so hard with how accurate it was, is how after high school, all of a sudden the pace skyrockets. And that's really exactly what it's like for somebody when you finally get out of school, because, and I'm going to say high school here because he didn't go to college. He went straight into the workforce and whatnot. But you could use college if like, for instance, if anybody listening goes to college and is in, like, you'll notice this is different from just getting out of high school. But what I mean is that the anime, the pacing is like, I don't know, 36 maybe episodes in high school. And then the whole last little chunk is just like, it zooms through life, because that's what happens when you finally get out of high school, is life railroads you, as soon as you get out of college or high school, out of your schooling environment, let's call it, right? Where all of a sudden you're an adult now. All of a sudden you have a job now. All of a sudden, where did this kid come from? Like, now my wife is pregnant. All that stuff, just it comes up so fast, and the pacing is it's like you're trying to catch up to the show almost with how fast things are going. But at the same time, it's portrayed in such a way where it's like the perfect pacing. And since we're in spoiler territory, there is a part where 5 years go by, and he hasn't really seen his daughter, and thankfully I'm not in that situation, so I can't attest to what that would be like. But I imagine, like, the way that time flies. I mean, because I do have kids, and my son is about to turn 5 this month, so for me, it's like, where did that time go? You know what I mean? But for him, it's like, it's an even different thing, because he hasn't even spent any time with her, and that for me is that pacing, I think, was an possibly unintentional, like, pressure on that emotional button that I thought was brilliantly handled if it was intentional, and if it was unintentional, it cut like a knife regardless, you know.
Oh yeah. So I want to mention something because this always bothers me. With season 1, everybody likes to shit on that one specifically and be like, oh, it's bad, but it's like they're like, oh, it takes so long, they don't even kiss until like forever. But it's like, that's the point. Your relationship doesn't pop up in 3 days, you know what I mean? It needs to build up slowly. And I know it is a harem. I know there's kind of like things associated with that. But firstly, it was obvious who he was going to pick from the beginning. And secondly, the other characters actually have interesting arcs. You know, it's like Fuko already, that arc, that was the best way they could have started that show to keep me in, because it is just a depressing arc, especially once you start figuring everything out. But it's like, even after that, Kotomi's arc as well, I think was really interesting just because, you know, like, I don't know how to explain this in any way besides I kind of guessed where it was going, and then I was completely wrong because she just breaks suddenly. And it's just like, it's actually
Kotomi's are, oh, she's the genius, right?
She's the genius.
Okay.
And it's like, to be fair, I just kind of get weird pacing wise for the first season. That's because the show finally starts to shift and go, okay, now that Nagisa and Tomoya have known each other for a while, we're gonna actually start building more towards this relationship. And the progression of the first season makes it so that when it finally happens, when he finally asks her, it's perfect. And then, you know, they're in a relationship for a bit, and the second they get out of fucking high school, shit goes crazy. And that's like, that to me was this like, whoa kind of moment, because I'm not at that point yet. I'm still in college, but even going into college, there's this very different pace once you get out of high school, because things aren't fun and games anymore. But the character writing in that show also is just really interesting, because with comedy in harem anime or just romance anime, it's really hit or miss with me. But there were several times in that show where I was just laughing so hard I had to pause the show. One of my favorite moments was the point where Sunohara walks up to Tomoyo, and you know, he's like, you know, that art for a while he was convinced that she was a guy or whatever. And she starts fucking kicking him and kicks him towards Tomoya, and he kicks him back. And
he's like, sorry, it happened on reflex. Literally, she's got like the counter, and then she kicks him off screen, and then Tomoya kicks him back, and then she does it again. Like, and it's like the numbers are just going nuts. That whole thing. So this was bizarre because I knew nothing about Clannad going into it. I had seen, you know, animated GIFs of stuff from it that I didn't know was from Clannad. So when I started watching it, I was like, I knew that it was a really heartfelt, sentimental show. I never expected for all the women to be like karate masters and like beating people up. that took me by surprise.
Every time Kyo showed up in the show, the book, she like tossed it like a billion miles per hour. And it was just like, I don't know why, but every time it happened, I died a little bit, because it's just like, it's hilarious to me. And all the characters are like this, except like Nagisa, who's like the frailest character in the show, in a literal sense too, for a lot of reasons. But like, I think the show did comedy really well, and it helped to alleviate the time periods after when the arcs would get really depressing. You know, because it's like after the Fuko arc, I was just like, I don't know if I want, like, this is a little too much.
Also, her parents.
Oh man, I love her parents so much.
Yeah,
dude.
And so you go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that bread gag should not have gotten me as many times as it did, but every time it got me.
You were saying your favorite part was, like, I had forgotten that was a great part where Sunohara gets kicked over to Tomoya, and he kicks back. But my favorite part was when they first learned that Nagisa is pregnant. and
man.
and the parents are like, what, how did this happen? And it's like, it's obviously they know. And she goes, like, Tomoya's like, no, don't say it. And she just screams at them, we have sex and sex makes babies.
Oh man, I watched the sub and it wasn't as good as that. Actually, that would have been better, because what she says in there, because he's like, what, did the stork drop him off? All this stuff, and she's like, me and Tomoyo have been doing dirty things at night when we're alone, and I'm like, Nagi, why?
No,
but if she had said that, I would have died. That's amazing.
It's so worth. You have to go back and rewatch the dub. I know then I don't know what it is about the character names are so bad, like Nagisa instead of Nagisa, and the thing that really that made me really upset is their daughter Ushio. They kept going off of, like, one person would call it Ushio, and then like in the next sentence they'd say Yushio because it's spelled with a U, right? And I'm legitimately thinking, because I studied Japanese and I know like the system of how the letters form, or the consonants or the syllables form to make the words. So I'm like confused. I literally had to look it up to find out if it was Ushio or Yushio, because I'm thinking, is it Yushio? And then Kyo and Rio, they called Rio Yo through a bunch of it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what? I have no idea. How are you getting this so wrong? But seriously, the voice acting is some of the best voice acting I have ever heard, other than the character names being all butchered. The boss, Tomoya's boss at the like maintenance jobs he was doing, that guy's voice has so much warmth to it. I have never ever heard a show capture that so incredibly well. He literally sounds exactly as that character looks. And I don't know if they just grabbed a guy who, like, maybe one of the voice actors, they're like, hey, we're having trouble casting this guy. That guy looks just like the super at my apartment. Let's bring him in. Like, that's what it feels like. They just grabbed a guy to do that role, because I never heard that voice come across that way before. And it was funny because it wasn't just that character. It's like there were a bunch of boss characters as the show progressed that all had that sort of warmth and age in their voice, including Tomoya's dad. Also had that sort of gentle warmth to it. Like the world has already beaten these people to a pulp kind of thing. And that was just, that was a highlight for sure. It was how good the dub was, because I've seen a lot of shows where they sort of rush them out, and they just do like the cookie cutter, I guess you could say, dubbing job, and it kind of shows. Like some shows can get away with it, but this show, I'm glad that like the casting was phenomenally well done, and the performances were incredible as well, and also it was nice that they were consistent through the whole series, which I guess because of how long it took to get over here, that kind of makes sense. But having the movie and stuff match as well was really good.
Oh man! So I watched the Japanese sub. I intend to watch the dub at some point, but funnily enough, I've been rewatching Clannad. I've stopped just at the point where Nagis has gotten pregnant, because I'm scared, because I know what's about to happen. And usually when you rewatch something, you think it's not going to hit you.
It's not going to be worse the second time. Yeah,
like it's not worse the second time, but it's still really bad. The Fuko thing still made me cry this time. I don't even want to know what's going to happen with me this time. But like I actually am curious to know your reaction to the events that happened in that, the spoilery stuff. Because for me, it was less like I wasn't affected by it as much from the same perspective, since for me it was more the familial death aspect that fucked me up. But obviously, I don't have the same, like, I don't have a kid yet. I don't have a wife yet, so I can't get this. Like, it was different for me.
Yeah, let me put it this way. I just had a baby girl like 6 months ago. right? And I mean, I was reliving my wife in the operating room because we had to do a scheduled C-section because my first kid, we had to do an emergency C-section, and they don't know what caused the incident that determined that it was an emergency, which was that the amniotic fluid was too low. So they basically, with my first kid, the amniotic fluid was too low. They had to induce her into labor. She was in labor for 3 days, and then they finally just did a C-section because she wasn't progressing, right? So because they don't know what caused that, that's what caused us to do the C-section this time. And when my son was born, my first kid, because my wife had been in labor for 3 days, when they had pulled him out, through the cesarean, my wife passed out. Once she saw my son, she immediately, she smiled and then she was gone because of the exhaustion. I didn't know though. And like they took me out of the room while they were operating on her, and sewing her back up and everything. And I was supposed to do like the dad duties of, first bath and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, you do it. Like, I don't, what's like, it was a really harsh experience because you want to be there for your kid, but it's like, I thought I was losing my wife, so it was brutal for me because not only did I go through that with my first kid, but my second kid, which I just had, we had a sort of a similar experience, but it was with my daughter, and they had a kid, a daughter in the show. So for me, you have no idea how much that hit home. With them doing the home birth out of necessity and it sort of turning into an emergency, and then her seeing the kid and then fading away. Like, God, that was hard. That was really hard to watch. And I was counting my blessings, let me put it that way, afterward, that I didn't go through a similar situation of my wife dying, because I don't know where I would be. I can tell you that I anticipate that if my wife were to die, it would be like having a wing ripped out. Like, you continue to live, but you're on the ground the rest of your life. And I can guarantee that if it actually does happen, the feeling will be significantly worse than the way I'm describing it and the way I think it would feel to go on living without your significant other, And so with the fact that I just had my baby girl, I'm in Arizona right now, and my family's in California with my in-laws because it's like it gets too hot at a certain point in Arizona for them to be here. So I kind of hold down the fort. But now it's like I'm away from my newborn, and I'm watching this show, and it's like, as a parent, I got to tell you, when you see kids get sick or go through possibly fatal things on movies and stuff, it's like once you've had that kid, it's like you are like better text, like better. I was like texting my wife, like, just like, hey, just want to make sure that, our kid's okay. So like, can you please just make sure she's still breathing, because I'm like bawling on the other end. I couldn't take it, and it was so hard. And like I said, the show does that weird twist at the end where they take a new heart out of the fanny pack and stuff it in you. And it's so unearned. It's like Deus Ex Machina in the worst possible way. It's like as if he wakes up and it's all a dream, right? But because of how brutal, like I said, it's like being stuffed in the dungeon. Because of how brutal it is, you are so happy to be given that lifeline back to a happy ending that you take it without questioning it, So those are my thoughts on it.
That actually, like, just hearing you describe that kind of screwed me up a little bit, because for me, it was like, it was less that I was, I was just more attached to the character. And so when I saw Tomoya just like, he's just, he's like Nagisa, he's like pushing her, like trying to wake her up. And I knew, I'm like, oh no, please, Please wake up. I don't want to see
they bait you with it. They bait you with it because as soon as he's holding the baby, she wakes up, right? She actually comes to, and you're like, oh, thank God. And then she dies.
Yeah. Oh gosh. And then it just cuts 5 years in the future. And I'm just like, no, you can't just cut it there. Like, what? How? And it's like watching the arc, like the parts after that, where he's just, it's like awkward and like really depressing, honestly. Like, you're just watching him slowly try and get with his daughter. The part that really got me was when they're in the field or whatever, and this is after he had the whole realization about his dad, and she's looking around for the toy and stuff, and he just doesn't understand. He doesn't get what the big deal is, and she just looks at him. She's like, "This is the first thing you gave me. Like, this is this is the first thing I have from you." I lost it. I started bawling.
No, it's funny. I was gonna say that as hard as it is getting through the death of Nagisa, that I don't even know how they did it. That scene, that whole arc of him going on the trip with her, or rather starting with her in the house alone, and oh God, there's so much is coming up right now, like memories of things I want to talk about. But the part about her running around in the house by herself, where Aki and Sanai had sort of tricked him into going on the trip by himself with her to force him to be with his kid, and the way that he acts during the trip, and how he breaks down that rough exterior of basically putting up that barrier to protect himself from the fact that his wife died giving birth to this child, to eventually embrace her. That was probably one of the most beautifully crafted story arcs I've ever seen. Like you said about
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was gonna say, like you said about her losing the toy, and then him coming to, like, her finally verbalizing that the reason it upsets her to have to lose the toy and them not finding it isn't because she just wants the toy and she's being stubborn. It's specifically because it's literally the first toy that he gave her. And that God, that's brutal.
Oh, jeez, the train ride when they're coming back was even worse, because it's been 5 years since he's even thought about her, and he finally starts recollecting on her, and he starts talking about her, and I couldn't take it. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I had to stop watching the show for a little bit, because like about that messed me up so much, but it was just depressing to me. Even though, like, it's a happy thing, watching him start crying as he recollects about his lost wife, it's just, jeez.
Yeah.
The show, like, that's the thing, okay? Even for me, I don't have the same situation as you where I can get the same amount of attachment, but regardless, this stuff screws me up to the point where, like, sometimes I'll just be listening to anime music, and I'll start listening to the Clannad soundtrack, and I have to stop because I will start I will cry because
the music. Going back to music, the music in the show, I think, is a powerful aspect to what's moving your emotions in that way. I really do think that the music with that piano and whatnot was really what does it.
Dude, something that was really smart about that is the show very slowly introduces you to that theme. It has Nagisa singing, the Big Dongo family theme.
Yeah.
And, it slowly introduces it to you. It's the credits theme. And then it uses that theme like a built-up piano version of it at the saddest moments. And oh gosh. I can't watch the credit sequence anymore.
Yeah, not even but the second season's credits, that impacted me so much that, like, that came out of nowhere, and that really hit me when he's with his daughter before they go on the actual trip, and she starts, like, skipping, and then the cycled animation perfectly lines up with the beginning of the thing that they've been showing you the whole damn season that you didn't realize was her. That was so freaking brutal. I don't know why that particular scene in that one episode where they actually loop the animation into the ending and all of a sudden the song starts, you're like, you've been playing with me this whole damn season. You had this planned, damn you, you know?
Oh, jeez. The funny thing is, that credit sequence is the bane of my existence because it's so happy and upbeat.
Yeah.
They play it like right after Nagisa dies. I'm like, no, don't do this. I'm crying. I'm like genuinely crying, bawling my eyes out, and they play this happy tune. It's just, I hated it. Like I hate it.
I thought that when that happened, it was literally like throw something at the TV kind of moment where you're like, are you kidding me? You're gonna play this after the scene.
Dude, to be fair, it would have been worse if they'd used the first season's credit sequence after that. Like, you know, for that one episode, they brought it back. Yeah. I probably wouldn't have finished the show for another month because of that.
It's funny you said that because I actually thought to myself, like, why didn't they? Oh no, actually, there's something else that came across my mind. Is on the Sentai DVDs, they do this really obnoxious thing, which I understand why they do it, but it's really obnoxious, where they play the credits and then they play the English credits afterward with just text scrolling on a black background. And on the first season, they play the Dango theme again for that credits, right? In the second season, they didn't play a song. It was just a cold ending, right? Which may have been more impactful. But I remembered thinking to myself early on, like, it's weird. Like, I mean, I guess the second ending theme wouldn't have worked well because it's too upbeat, but I felt like they could have used the Dango theme, and I thought maybe there was like a licensing thing where they wouldn't give them that song for season 2 or something. And then that song shows up in season 2 and you're like, oh my God, no, not the feels, no, to me.
Oh, jeez. So, I think it's like, it's really funny because I actually didn't know whether you were even going to like the show at all. Like, I was pretty scared that you'd watch through all of it and be like, yeah, it wasn't even sad. It was just like,
well,
you know,
I'll be honest with you. Here's my first thought watching season 1. Because again, I've said this numerous times that by some miracle, the show hadn't been ruined for me, right? And when I got through the bulk of season 1, I'm like, you know, I feel kind of dumb now because I don't really feel like there was anything to ruin, you know? And it was obvious to me that Nagisa was going to die, but Ushio also dying took me by, like, I mean, it's obvious by the time it's going to happen that it's going to happen, but you just never expect them to actually do that to you. Because what they do in the show is they lift you up for a season and a half and then drop you off a cliff. And then they lift you back up and then drop you again. So that was
that scene when they're walking through the snow. It was just like everything about it was perfect to just be horrible. They don't play any music at all. It's just their footsteps in the snow. And play it out as long as possible. Like, you know, by this point it's happened. And at some point she just stumbles over and she can't even see anymore. And she's just like, Dad, are we on the train yet? And I'm like, no, please don't do this. This is worse. And it's just like that. If they had ended the show like that, I don't know how I would have felt about it. Like, I know that the ending is the Deus Ex Machina, like, out of nowhere. Oh, it's a happy ending. But if it had not ended like that, I don't know how I would have felt. Because that would have been such a depressing ending. Because it's not just Ushio who dies. Tomoyo also dies right in that scene. At least it's like...
Oh, does he?
Yeah, apparently he just dies right there in the snow with her.
You have a broken heart, like, sure.
Well, it could be. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was apparently the visual novel explained it, but it's just like a point where I was done. I was just like, you can't. If you do any of this again,
if I had realized that Tomoyo had also died there, I actually would have been okay with the show ending there, because at least his whole family is sort of reunited afterlife, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Wow, what a great event! They're all reunited in death.
No, but I'm just saying that it's like it would have been easier than if the show had continued with him turning into his dad. You know, the way his dad was sort of at the beginning, just like losing himself to cigarettes and alcohol, over the fact that he started and had such a promising start in life and then lost everything and then was forced to live the rest of his life. I mean, the show goes in a different direction, and I'm glad that they did, but I'm just saying that it would have been even more brutal. It would have been less brutal had I known that he had actually died in that moment, because it would have been, at least it's over. At least you have to live. At least you don't have to outlive your kid, you know, because having kids, the entire purpose of the human species having kids is to further your genetic line, right? And literally your hormones, your dopamine receptors, all of this stuff has evolved in order to get that to be what you do. And then having those kids and then having them die before you die, but after a point where you can't have more, like that is like a sort of self-death that I don't think anybody who hasn't experienced that could ever fully comprehend. You know, to have to outlive your kids, especially after your wife has died, or if let's say you are the female, then after your childbearing years, you know, to live an additional, let's say, 50 years without your family. You know, that's got to be like the absolute worst experience. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, you know?
Yeah. I also, something I want to point out that, like, after the fact really messed me up, because I didn't really think about it much, but Sanae and Akio, they took care of her for 5 years, despite the fact that they had just lost their own daughter. Yeah. Like, obviously it was going to be just as horrible for Tomoya, but they didn't even have the ability to seriously mourn it, because they had to take care of the kid immediately. Right.
That's actually a plot point in the thing where he realizes that, you know, they've been shouldering this burden the whole time. You know, one of the to sort of quickly tie this into another aspect, one of the things that really hit me a lot harder than I thought it was him reconciling things with his dad.
Oh yeah,
for the same sort of way. Like, that came out of nowhere, and I was just like, oh my freaking goodness, like, how are you doing this to me? You know, key visual.
Like, I actually have something I want to mention and why this show means so much to me later. But this show, it's impressive how well it manages to continue to just barrel over you with the feels, I guess, so to speak. I don't have a better word for that right now, but it's like not all of it's even sad. Some of it is happy or it's good, but it's just consistent. It never feels like, oh, the show's just on autopilot. Like, it's constantly doing this kind of stuff. Even in season 1, it's like for example, and I don't know if this affected you in the same way it affected me, but in season 1 at the end, when Nagisa's, you know, in the play and she's like breaking down because, you know, she's had the realization that her parents, you know, they'd given up their lives, and her dad comes out and tells her that once, you know, that now she's their dream, that they, you know, they want her to succeed. That really got to me.
Yeah, because that's actually one of the major reasons why I don't like the movie, and I'm glad I didn't see the movie first.
Oh,
because the movie tells you that he's like, he was an actor and stuff, and the movie does all this stuff where it actually the show earns the reveals so honestly that if you saw the movie first, it robs you of these very genuinely earned moments, you know? And that was one of them with him being an actor, her discovering it and it sort of breaking her spirits, but then it becoming You know, like, because that legitimately is what it is to become a parent, is that the rest of your life is self-sacrifice, but it's self-sacrifice that's entirely worth it for your kids. Because one of the things that I find interesting about becoming a parent is, like, your hair, you lose all your hair, but your kids, like, you lose your looks because of the let's say the stress of raising your kids, but your looks live on through them. Like, that's the passing of the genetic. It's a very bizarre thing that I've never heard anybody actually, like, articulate, but that evolutionary, like, desire and like hierarchy of needs to pass on your genes is so evident once you've actually had kids and you experience life as you raise them, and they become like a mini version of you, that it is as if you are literally living on through your ancestors. And exactly what they said in the show about, you know, your kids' dreams, fulfilling your kids' dreams become your new dream once you have them. Like, you literally throw everything else aside, because being an actor, being a musician, that's not paying the bills, and your kids come first, and their dream, maybe they'll have the shot. That's exactly what it's like. And you're right. That was one of the most meaningful moments. The whole first season, that because that takes place in the first season, right? Yeah, during the play thing. The whole first season, there were a lot of moments, like the whole Foucault arc, I could feel the feelings welling up, but it's like it didn't actually produce like an emotional, like I wasn't crying over it, you know? But I could tell, like, you know, that sort of emotional manipulation was going on, right? But that scene was like, that did bring a tear to my eye. Just because I think that what it is about Clannad is that the show is so incredibly genuine with what it's portraying, in terms of it doesn't pull its punches, that's for sure, but it also, like, just little things like Yusuke, for example, telling the story when they're driving in the truck to the jobs and whatnot, telling the story to Tomoya about being a musician and writing all these love songs, and having somebody who actually cared about the love songs when he was in high school. And then he graduates and he writes this music, and then that crime was committed by somebody who was a fan of his, and then it gave him this feeling like, I wasn't creating music for me anymore, it was for thousands of people, and then I couldn't create anymore, and all that stuff from that story. It's like, it was so genuine to sort of crystallizing just a lifetime of life lessons into for what they were doing, a pretty short show, you know, because it's a coming of age story, and it hits so many of the important moments. And it does so in such a genuine way that I just don't know how they actually managed to do it. There was a big chunk of the show where my brain almost sort of just turns off, because, like, I wasn't, particularly in season 2, the beginning of season 2, where they're still in high school. By that time, I was basically done with the high school. I was ready for them to be out of it, you know, like the whole arc with the blonde kid and his sister,
yes,
you know, and getting back on the soccer team and stuff. Like, I wasn't feeling that as much. I mean, it still had some heartfelt moments, but I mean, it's partially because Greg Ayres voiced that guy in the English dub, and it's hard to take that character, that voice acting seriously on that character. I don't know, but there's a lot going on there. But there's a big chunk. There really is a big chunk of episodes towards the end of season 1, like the right at the end, and maybe the first full disc of season 2 worth of episodes, like the first 6 episodes or so. I really wasn't feeling the show that much, but I stuck with it, and God, it was worth it, you know. And I guess it's weird because, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to mention the arc with Suno's little sister. That one actually did get a reaction out of me, but it was mostly just rage because like I have sisters, okay, and like I know the whole sibling thing where it's like, you know, you gotta act like you don't actually like each other, but if something actually, like, you know, if I had seen the soccer team doing that to my little sisters, I don't care how weak I actually am, I would have fucking attacked them,
right?
Because they're family, and I consider my sisters extremely important to me. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't,
you know,
I don't have any sisters,
aside, I love my sisters.
I can get what you're saying. Yeah, of course. And to be clear, that moment at the end of that arc was impactful. But I'm just saying the lead in with her like trying to make him jealous, and it was like it got real weird. And there's a lot of bizarre moments in that show. What was that? So early on, there's a part where I forget who he's talking to. It might have been May, or it might have been Nagisa, where he was saying something about how Sunohara was gay for him or something.
Oh yeah,
and they do the scene where they like swap out the characters and stuff, and then at the end when Fuko meets up with Ushio, there's that scene where he says, if there was a button and people told you not to touch it, what would you do? I'd push it. He's like, well, the button launched all the nuclear warheads, so the world is ended, right? Like he's basically running her through the mental understanding that if she was in control, the world would end in a matter of minutes. And then she says, well, if there was a pair of tights and everybody told you couldn't wear them, what would you do? And he said nothing, right?
Hilarious.
Climb higher to find this pair of tights.
Oh my gosh. I just thought it was hilarious because in her mind he yells, Tomoya is awesome, when he puts them on. And that was just hilarious.
There's so much. Sunohara has these things where he gets Sunohara to add in a toilet at the end of all.
Oh yeah.
That was so funny in the English dub.
I want to be a baseball player and an astronaut and a toilet seat. It's just like Tomoya forgot completely, asked him to do that. And so he's just like, that's really weird. What's wrong with you?
And it's like he's still doing it during the reunion scenes. It's like also, literally like 8 years have gone by and he's still doing it.
Also, what also made me laugh was that scene where he's like, you know, Tomoya is trying to get him to pick up Tomoyo, you know, like he's like trying to tell him things, and he's like, do a bowling pose and tell her you love her.
I think that's the scene that's right before her kicking him over to Tomoya.
Oh my gosh. That was the, like, I don't know why, but the sheer ridiculousness of having somebody throw a bowling pose while telling someone you're attracted to them. That was just hilarious to me.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And one of my favorite scenes was when they were carving the starfish, and Aki, they have the bread gag going. There's a part where he gets mad and he stomps his foot down, and then you see he's got like the carving knife stabbed in his foot.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh jeez.
I loved it. I had such a good time watching so much of it. Oh gosh, it's I don't know. I would give the show a solid 4 stars for sure. The movie not so much, but there were actually some things like I kind of sort of my strategy is with anime is I construct the most enjoyable aspect, like the most enjoyable way of perceiving the series through the amalgamation of everything. So like I know that Dragon Ball Z movies are not technically canon, but I like to think that they are because I enjoyed the movies. So I try to like work out ways for them to work in my head, you know, for the experience to be more full. There are some things in the Clannad movie that I understand they couldn't have been done the same way in the show, but I liked how they handled them in the movie. Like for instance, the Dongo family, where like she's been collecting them and she's got like so friggin' many of them, and that was I like how they did it in the show better, but there were just little things like that where the difference, like how things were handled differently, or for instance, this was something I thought could have been even better if they had also done it in the show, was her not being able to finish writing the play in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
That could have.
Like, I'll agree with you, but I think the problem is just that the movie, it's just not as good. Like, the writing feels like it's not as high quality.
They're condensing it so much into just that little amount. Yeah, that was
just like
bad mistake there.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, like, judging it as like a movie, it's like that. Yeah. But funnily enough, you gave it a 4 stars, and for a second I'm like, well, that's kind of low, and then I realized, oh wait, no, that's my rating scale, where that would be a like unexpectedly low.
4 is out of 5.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So my rating scale, unfortunately, is based off the IGN scale, which means that anything below 7 is not worth anything, pretty much for me.
All right.
But also, a 10 does not mean a show is perfect. In fact, most of the time, I give like a show a 10 that I have tons of problems with, or that I find extremely flawed. But I give 10s to things that had an impact on me in some way.
Right.
That I came out of the experience and was like, I feel like I was changed a little bit.
Sometimes the flaws cause the contemplation you have during and after the show is over, that are, again, contributing to that experience. So it's like, and everybody obviously rates their stuff differently. Obviously 4 would actually be an 8 if you were to rate it on a scale of 10. But yeah, I get what you're saying, and I agree that sometimes, like, your favorite show can have all sorts of flaws in it. You know, I mean, Berserk, for example, has a lot of animation errors in the original one. They do that thing where it's like something you see in Scooby-Doo often, where the cell, like, there's a character who has bandages on his face. This one sticks out in my mind, and when he's talking, like, the bandage keeps changing color because between the cell things they painted it the wrong color. You know, it's like it's a problem. There's a mistake here. Can't possibly be a perfect show, but you can still give it a perfect 10 because you can forgive, you know, an animation error, because the rest of the show shined so brightly. You could say that you can overlook the errors. And sometimes, like, for a different example, sometimes the errors are part of what makes the show endearing. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes mistakes can actually make things, like, it can actually raise the value of it, because that mistake got you thinking about stuff for so long, and you just entertained the different universe ideas of whatever universe they were building in the show, you know? So I totally agree with that.
So, like, well, the thing is, like, it's not just minor errors. Obviously, that's still present. Like, for example, Death Note, which I'm obsessed with. That show, if you really look close at the animation, it's horrible. Like, a lot of the shots, the character designers, it's like they spent no time on it. And so you have these, like, just dorky-ass faces throughout the whole show. But, like, my thing is, even if I find something, like, horribly flawed in a lot of ways, it still doesn't mean I won't give it a 10. So, for example, the show Future Diary. I don't know if you've watched it, but if I was actually rating that show, like, reviewing it, it is a mess. Like, the show is just an absolute mess in almost every regard. But I had so much fun with it, and I enjoyed it so much that I did not care about any of that, and I still gave it a 10.
Let me give you an example of what you're talking about with the show Haruhi Suzumiya.
I love Haruhi, actually.
Okay. No, I'm going to give you an example of here's a mistake, and it's a blatant mistake, but it's not going to necessarily, trying to see if I can find the GIF that'll demonstrate it. There's a scene in Haruhi. Oh, I found it. Wait. Oh yeah, here it is. Well, it's not a the title is "Explain This, Atheist."
Oh my gosh.
This is really funny. Hold on, I'm going to screen share it. Where basically it's her turning around and you realize that her leg switches. So left leg, right? So this is the right leg. And now it's the left leg.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So literally,
To be
what
fair,
the problem is that this layer should have been on the other side. So they should have put that leg should have been in front of this one for the beginning part. But yeah, this is a
yeah,
mistake in the animation that now that you know it, you can't avoid it. But it doesn't lower the rating of the show. You know what I mean?
yeah. To be fair, I know you're not the biggest fan of Haruhi, but that show is also really important to me in a weird way, where it's like it was like the third anime I ever watched, and it was the second one I actually liked because the other one I watched wasn't good. But it's like I don't know, the show just it was a recommendation from a friend, and I didn't take it seriously because he never even finishes most of the shows he watches. But I just loved it from like beginning to end, and then I watched the movie, and I'm like, wow, how is it like? It's like the movie makes it look like the series isn't even trying suddenly.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, I'll say this, and I've said this numerous times on the channel before, but like I said, I didn't really think that the show was all that good, but the movie was so good that it actually made me want to go back and rewatch the show and give it another chance. Because I have watched the entirety of the show, and I just didn't think it lived up to the hype. Is the thing. So I don't want to say that it was bad. Well, yeah, it's like you said, like you had a friend who pestered you to watch it. I had a friend who, because just so that everybody's clear, I exclusively watch stuff that I own. That's one of the major reasons why I collect so much. So my friend had watched it when it first came out in Japan, like when it was broadcasting, right? And he was trying to get me to watch it for a long time. He bought like a bootleg DVD of the set and everything. God. And like we watched he had watched like on the discs on the bootleg, and he was trying to get me to watch it, but I didn't end up getting this series because when it first got released by Bandai, it was kind of expensive, and then eventually I finally got it. And then even still, I didn't get around to watching it for a long time. Then when I finally did, by that time the hype had not lived up to the hype that had been sort of generated. But like I said, the movie, as you said, Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya, is so phenomenally good, and I think it's the direction in it that is like it sucks you in. It actually captivates you from beginning to end in a way that made the show, because the show's got sort of a randomness to it that because they did this like avant-garde thing where there's like 30 different episode orders you can watch it in, and it changes. So, and I'm like, I was like, I'm not gonna. My friend actually sat and watched all the different orders. By the way, that's again, it's like if I'd been led to believe the show would be worth it, is what I'm getting at, and I just didn't think it was in that regard. Like I wasn't gonna sit down and rewatch it and all the different orders and stuff, but I did like the movie a lot. Like I may have given that 5 stars. I mean, there have been a couple times in my life where I will put on a movie that I'm intending to fall asleep to. Like I'm just putting it on. I'm going to go to bed, and then I'm going to try to come back to it later and actually watch it when I'm awake. But I'm just putting it on to go to bed, and the movie is so captivating that I stay up way later than I wanted to, because I'm putting it on. I'm literally ready to fall asleep. I'm just putting it on for background noise, so to speak, right? And the 2 times that I distinctly remember this happening was Haruhi Suzumiya, The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya was one of them, and the other one was a movie called Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which is a Korean movie it's a sequel in the trilogy for Old Boy. And that movie, like, so just saying like, oh, I was about to fall asleep and it kept me captivated. This movie, way above Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya in terms of that regard, because this was during a time when I was in high school. I was taking ADD medication, which is a stimulant. So you literally you wake up dead tired, and you take the pill, and then 10 minutes later you're wide awake, right? Your body is exhausted, but your mind is like wired, right? And then the ADD medication wears off around noon. But the side effect that keeps you awake lasts until about 3 a.m, right? So I'm at a point where I'm going to bed like every single night at 3 or 4 a.m, getting up at 6, taking the pill, and then being wide awake mentally, but just physically just falling apart, right? And during this particular year in high school, I was taking Japanese class at a college, and because I didn't want to take French or Spanish, so I had to take an additional smaller dosage after class or after school in order to go from high school to the college campus to go to the library to double check all my homework for Japanese class and study flashcards and everything, and then take the class and then go home and try to get some sleep if I could that night. Most of those nights I was up all night because of the additional medication, right? And so that night I needed sleep so badly that I chose not to take that additional dosage, right? Before class that day. And when I got home, I mean, I was so exhausted that I can't even believe I got through the intro before the DVD menu to even hit play, right? And this movie is not in English. There's no dub, but I'll just say that it captivated me so incredibly well. And it's kind of funny because it actually is kind of a cross between Clannad and Ichi the Killer, which is why I've been like building it up to this point, because it's not as violent as Ichi the Killer, but it is dark. Like, it's pretty dark. There's in all of Park Chan-wook, or whatever the guy's name is, the director of Old Boy, sort of in all of his stuff in this series, there's incest in it, and just dark stuff like kidnappings and death of people and whatnot. And it's a tragedy. It's like, so this is kind of like, imagine, like I said before, about how Clannad, if it had ended with Tomoya dying, like if I had realized that he was supposed to die at the same time Ushio had died, then it would have been easier for me to walk away from than if it had ended with him having to live the rest of his life without his family. But it's kind of like that, where it's like it's a tragedy, and it's like just constantly things are just going so downhill, and it's orchestrated in such a way where it's going downhill, but by chance. Like, everything is just like literally just to give you a quick rundown of the plot, they need money. Like, it's at a point where they're in a really bad situation. The main character is deaf and mute, I think. And so there's sign language, right, in the movie. And his sister is terminally ill, and he's like working all these jobs trying to pay for her medical bills, and then they devise a scheme, because they aren't going to be, they're going to lose their house basically, or their apartment. So they kidnap his boss's daughter so that they can get a ransom. And then because the guy is deaf and mute, he doesn't hear in the background the girl, while they're sort of organizing everything, the girl falls into the river and drowns. And they end up accidentally losing their hostage, and she dies. And then it becomes a revenge tale of the daughter's dad hunting them down. And it's just this tragedy the whole time. And it's all by chance. It's all by chance that the circumstances are not going their way. And somehow the movie is so freaking cathartic that you come out the other side actually feeling better. Like the next day. It's kind of like when you work out as hard as you can and you feel terrible that night, but and maybe working out is not a good example because you actually feel worse the next day. But you know how like you actually feel better after you put in that super long day's work. Let's say it's rather than say working out, you work from the crack of dawn until like 8 o'clock at night or later, and then you get in bed and it's been a horrible, rotten day and you're exhausted. But then the next day, because you did all that working, you actually feel really good. That's kind of what it's like. So anyway, but like I said, it is a similar feeling to Clannad in sort of the tragedy aspect of it, but it doesn't give you the it doesn't give you the new heart at the end. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I may or may not check that out at some point, but we got
Well,
a surprisingly off
definitely
track
watch.
actually for a bit.
Yeah, definitely watch Old Boy first if you do. But I'm just saying, like, for anybody who actually has seen both and are watching the stream after the fact, check it out because it's a combination of the two, and it's very much worth checking out. But yeah, back to Clannad and Ichi if we want to go back to that too. Do you have anything else you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, pretty much. The only other thing I wanted to mention was pretty much why I specifically like this series so much. I can't go into too much detail, obviously, because it's a little too personal. But I'm pretty sure you're aware that my family situation is a little odd.
Yeah,
and because of that, I have had a very negative portrayal of romance in general and marriage and all that for a very long time. To the point where I even still kind of am really iffy about it because I don't want to end up in a similar situation.
Yeah,
but
I think a lot of people are in the
was
same shoes actually.
Yeah, this series though, this was the first time where I saw something like that actually portrayed marriage, but also made it look good. Like actually, you know, they're obviously perfect, but it was like I think this is the first time where I actually looked at it and was like, you know what? Maybe it actually would be nice. Like maybe it'd actually be a good thing. I'm being really vague, obviously, but
yeah,
it was just kind of this weird moment where I finally came to the realization that no, the situation I have is abnormal. It's not the norm for this.
Right. Well, something that needs to be mentioned, and I don't want to take away your hopes of having a happy marriage because I've got a very happy marriage, and I would like to think that there's a that sort of perfect puzzle piece partner out there for everybody. But I will say that the reason that marriage went so smoothly for Nagisa and Tomoya is because they were both incredibly mature people. Okay, and that's kind of something that happens in Japan due to the way that they sort of structure their parenting and growing up life, and that kids are sort of already on their own while they're in high school. You know, like they walk to school. You know, they're responsible for cooking dinner, and like all that kind of stuff is building over time to a maturity level that brings them personal responsibility that I don't think in the West we have nearly on the same scale. You know, people are a lot more immature, and I think that a lot of relationships suffer, especially marriages, because people jump in without having done, let's say, the growing up that's necessary ahead of time. Now, I will say that having said that, that my wife and I were both a bit immature. We actually, this is another reason why Clannad really resonated with me, is that I met my wife in high school while I was in high school, right? And we both were a bit more immature than would have probably been ideal for getting married. But you sort of grow if you're willing to commit to the relationship and to the marriage, you will grow into that maturity together instead of it tearing apart the relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, like I get that. It's just like you know, a lot of the stuff you watch doesn't usually, you know, at least I watch, romance doesn't go that far. Mm-hmm. So this was like the first time where I actually saw an example that wasn't negative in some fashion. Like at least like the first one that resonated with me. So it's kind of just special to me because of that. It means a lot to me because it's my shining hope that maybe not every single person is crazy.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from, and I know a bit about your situation you're describing. So, like I get it, you know, and I'm glad that the show is that for you. I really am. And in fact, if you haven't seen it, have you ever seen Love, Chunibyo, and Other Delusions?
Yes, I have seen that one.
Yeah, that's another one that I think really gives off that a similar sort of it's kind of ironic I bring that up because that's the exact opposite maturity level in terms of the characters. But it also, in spite of that, I guess let me just say that the maturity level makes it easier because striking out on your own and getting married and moving out of your parents' place and all that, it's very difficult to start adulting, as they say. And as long as you are committed to each other, that is something that you'll figure out on your own as you like together, like in the relationship, how to get your taxes done and all that kind of stuff will just sort of happen together, so I guess I don't know exactly how I'm trying to describe this, but I'm just saying that I feel like there's a little bit of rose-colored glasses being painted in the marriage aspect of Clannad. Like they made the marriage aspect less harsh than it really is. Like for instance, I had moments like Tomoya did where you make plans with your significant other and then work gets in the way. And it seems like there's just no break for you. Work is constantly tearing you away, and you don't see each other anymore. And they handled that way better than my wife and I did when we were first married, because I was stuck between a rock and a hard place where it's like, I can let my wife get upset with me and I know she's not going to leave me for the first, like, I don't know, let's say month of it at least, but I can't let my boss get upset with me because then I lose my job. And then shortly after, the heartache of losing the job is going to start to have its effect on the marriage. You know what I mean? And then it's just going to be even worse, So, so you get put in that situation where you can't say no to work, even though you want to say yes to your spouse, because if you do say no to work, then down the line, your entire relationship will suffer regardless. You know what I mean? So, and but what sucks about that is that in saying no to your spouse and having to say yes to work, it looks to your spouse, if they aren't if they're not sophisticated enough to perceive the long-term reasoning behind it, like you're saying no to them. You know what I mean? So, like I said, it's just, it tackles some hard stuff, but it paints it through some rose-colored glasses in that, Nagisa was such a strong person that she was able to power through it, Well, and it's weird.
That's fair.
Go ahead.
That's fair but it's like, it's an anime. I don't expect it to be 100% real. It's just, it was nice to have something as an example of how it could be good and not a mistake, basically. At least that's how I viewed it for a while, is that it wasn't a good idea to do it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I understand. And like I said, I think that especially in Western society these days, a lot of men are, there's like the whole MGTOW movement and everything, where men are determining that having a relationship is too dangerous to their well-being to actually pursue. So they literally have a whole movement called Men Going Their Own Way. Sorry, I swallowed something. They have a whole movement regarding men going their own way, where they are just sort of resigned to not have any relationships because it's too dangerous. The way that society is built in America, especially, if you get a divorce, is like alimony, and just it can destroy everything you worked for in life can be crumbled by the fact that court systems usually will value your spouse over your well-being, So and that's not even getting into what's going on with you in particular, but that for a lot of guys is creating that movement in the whole sort of feeling that you're going through of not necessarily sort of being turned off to the idea of a relationship in that way. So anyway, I was gonna say something else, but I totally forgot what it was.
I do have something to
go ahead.
Bring up, although not about Clannad. This is actually related to something else. So You messaged me on Twitter, and apparently you're gonna be watching School Live.
Yeah.
I'm actually really excited for you to watch that, and I decided since you're gonna watch that, I'm gonna watch a show that apparently you really like that I haven't checked out. I'm gonna watch Lupin because I've never actually watched it. I don't know what it is even. I mean, I have no clue what it's about. So
Yeah.
you know, since you're watching my favorite, I figure I'll watch your favorite as well.
All right. Where are you gonna jump in?
I was just gonna start with Lupin the Third. I assume that was fine.
No. Lupin the Third has part 1, which is the green jacket, part 2, which is the red jacket. There's the pink jacket. Right now, there's the blue jacket. They're just starting right now, part 5. But you can jump in wherever and you'll enjoy it. My favorite is part 2, but I'll just say my favorite. I love part 2. I love the dub. The dub for me is what makes the show. Is the dub that Geneon had done. So if I were you, I mean, because like I said, you could jump in anywhere, wherever you feel comfortable. You could jump in at a movie. If you want to watch my favorite Lupin movie, watch Farewell to Nostradamus. And again, you gotta get the dub. The dub is so funny. But yeah, so I'm just saying, like, if I could suggest something to you, I would say watch Monster instead of Lupin, just because Lupin is such a colossal task. That I would say watch Naoki Urasawa's Monster.
I'm part of Monster, actually. I didn't do it personally. It's not my thing.
How far did you
part of
get
it just I think I got about 10 episodes, and the acting was kind of weird, and I don't like older anime usually as much. There's just like this disconnect for me where I know I'm watching an old anime the entire time I'm watching it.
Yeah. So did you at least get far enough into Monster to learn that the kid he saves at the beginning turns out to grow up to be a serial killer?
Yeah, like that's the main premise of it.
Right.
It's just I don't know.
I forgot what episode that was.
Like, I know that people like to mention it in relation to Death Note, and they're like, "Oh, well, you'll love it if you like Death Note." But the thing is, from the onset, Death Note is constantly just throwing stuff at you. It remains exciting, whereas Monster has a lot of slow, very like elements in it, especially at the beginning, at least.
Have you seen Steins Gate?
I have seen Steins Gate. That one, I also had the same issue with that. I did finish that one.
Wow.
Yeah, but the first.
Hold on. I will say this though. The way that I was with Clannad, where there was a big chunk of nothing's going on, you have to finish Steins Gate. Okay, it is worth it. Okay, I'll just say that.
Steins Gate already.
Oh, you did. Okay, I thought you said you couldn't finish it.
It was in my top 20 list actually.
Like, oh, really?
It is one of my favorites. But the first 10 episodes are really dull. Like, it takes a long time for it to get started. It's important.
A lot of setup, yeah.
Yes, it's important. It is vital to the story. But that also means that there is just a lot of like, okay, great, I get to see more banter about nothing. And it just keeps going like that. But then once it gets started, it's worth it. But I feel like with Lupin, it's something like, I don't know, I might as well just check it out anyways. And
yeah, well, you can jump in anywhere. Yeah, well, it's called Lupin the Third because he's the third descendant of Arsène Lupin, right? But the show has Lupin the Third Part 1, Lupin the Third Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, and Part 5 is airing right now, which is the Blue Jacket in France. Part 4 is the Blue Jacket in Italy. But literally, you could jump in anywhere. I've never experienced Lupin and not liked it. I've never watched any of it and not enjoyed what I was getting into. So I think you'll have a good time. But as you said, you're not a fan of older anime, Yeah. So if I were you, jump into Part 4 then, because Part 4 has the spirit of Lupin is actually captured pretty well, but it's much more recent, so it's animated. It's widescreen. It's animated differently than the old sort of cell shaded style. It's got a different feel to it, but it's the same spirit, you could say.
All right. I think I'll just start with Part 4 then, like you said. To be fair, it's gonna take me a while to get through it because I go through anime very slowly usually.
That's fine. Yeah, take your time.
I like to enjoy things. The only time where I will rush through a series is if it is enraptured me to a point where I am not capable of stopping.
Yeah,
and that doesn't happen very
Erased.
frequently.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, Erased did that. Clannad did that for me. I watched the whole show in 2 days. That was an interesting 2 days.
I watched it maybe 4 days. But I only because I had the podcast in the middle.
I would get up.
But yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
And go to bed like after watching Clannad the whole day.
Yeah.
But I usually like to enjoy stuff because it sucks when you go through something that ends up being really good, but you rushed through it, and so you can not only can you never experience it the same way again, it only lasted for like 2 days, and now it's gone.
Well, let me tell you this. I have everything, literally everything that they've released of Lupin, and I haven't even watched half of it because I'm pacing it too. So I'll just tell you that. Like, don't feel bad if it takes you a while to get through it. I mean, just give it a chance, and if you want to, just go with one of the movies. Part 4 has a movie called The Italian Game. That's a pretty good one. Would be worth checking out because it's basically part 4 condensed. I actually saw it at Anime Expo. There's a screening for it, and that would be a great introduction to it. And it's also in the more recent art style and everything that you would probably really enjoy that one if you wanted to devote a smaller chunk of time to being introduced to it. So that's right. What I would suggest.
I think I'm going to start with the anime first, though, just because I usually like to start with that before going into the movies. In regards to School Live, I don't know how the Blu-ray works because I haven't even bought it myself since I'm cheap as shit. But if they have an option for subs, I would recommend choosing that over the dub. I watched the first 3 episodes dubbed, and it's not bad, but it's very standard. Like you kind of watch it, like they kind of just put a dub out. Like
I give a show a few episodes, and I'll usually choose in the first couple episodes which one I'm going to do, and I'll actually go back and rewatch it if I.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, just because sometimes, especially for a show that I really want to enjoy, like basically the rule of thumb is if you watch something subbed, you're going to be focused the entire time because you have to be, right? So if a show feels like it's going to suck me into a point where I feel like that's going to happen, and I feel like the dub isn't like delivering, then I'll go back and start over because usually the subs are better and I'm able to get sucked in even further because I have to be focusing on everything that's happening in order to fully translate the show, because it's too exhausting with the level of Japanese that I know to translate constantly. So being able to read it and get the direct, okay, so that's what they're saying, because there's a lot of English gets thrown in the middle of Japanese phrases that really throws you off when you're trying to translate because you're in Japanese mode. So anyway, but I'll watch it subbed and just see. After I finish it, I might go back and see how the dub was. But yeah, if you say sub, I'll definitely check it out subbed.
Yeah, regardless if you were gonna switch, I was gonna say watch the first episode subbed because that one's. I don't know how to explain it. It just is better to be focused on the first episode for that series specifically. It is very important.
It's only 13 episodes, right?
It's 12 actually. It's not even 13.
Okay, so it's a short one. Yeah, if it's a short show, I will be able to get through it, because specifically right now, like this is why I'm devoting time to watch it, is because since my family's in California right now and I'm sort of home alone, I don't have I don't have to wrangle kids, so I can actually take a moment to get through those 12 episodes, and I can do it subbed because I'm not holding a baby, rocking them to sleep, and making food for the other kid. I'm not doing all that extra stuff that makes me have to do a lot of listening to the English dub instead of focusing and stuff. So I'll definitely make it a point to go through it in Japanese.
Yeah. Also, I don't know. Have you watched any of the more modern slice of life moe-esque anime?
Like what?
Just any anime from the last, I'd say, like 5 years that is a slice of life, basically.
Other than Chunibyo, not really. Like, I mean,
Okay, well, if
I
you watch
might have.
Shinibyo, if you watch Shinibyo, it should be fine. It's just there's a bit of exaggeration going on with the characters. Obviously, it's the I can't describe much because I don't want to spoil anything, but it is a little. It's a little bit like, okay, I know what this is when you're watching it, but
Mhm.
stick with it. Basically, it's not a
Okay.
harem
Well,
though.
yeah. Oh, don't worry. I'm sure I'll be able to enjoy it. And it's like, I usually will come away from a show, and I will find something that I liked about it. You know, a show has to be really bad for me to hate it, and the only shows that I really hate are like I said, like Oh My Goddess, I just can't stand because of the sappy romance that is so artificial, and the injected, drama where they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, you must hate me now, I'll go back to the heavenly realm. And it's like, no, Bell Dandy, my wish was for you to stay with me. It's like, just gag me with a spoon.
Yeah.
So stuff like that I can't stand. And also like just some anime, like, I don't know. Probably one of my least favorites is an anime called Cyber Team and Akihabara, but that's actually one. I really hate that one mostly because the dub is just great. Anyway, I'm not even gonna get started on it. It'll derail this whole thing even further. But yeah, I'll watch it. I'll watch it subbed, and I'll jump on it as soon as I can. But like I said, I got to get through Razafon for the next podcast, and I think it's a 26 episode show with a movie. So I wanna get a big chunk of that out of the way so that I'm prepared for the next podcast. Before I jump
Oh yeah.
into switching gears.
Well, it's fine. I'm just giving you recommendations for watching the show since it's kind of like it's a show that kind of just has gotten forgotten about, which sucks because no one's ever watched it, so I have no one to talk about it with.
Yeah.
But I was obsessed with it while it was running. It wasn't just either. My entire friend group, we were all just obsessed with it to the point where it was almost frightening. But the nature of the show, it's just like it's kind of, I guess, not like Clannad, but you lose the impact if you know what it is or if you know what's going to happen. It's like, well, there's no point to it.
Right.
I don't think it's going to hit you in the same way Clannad did, obviously, since this one's going to be harder to relate to. Like, even I myself had trouble relating to it as much. It's just more, the show means a lot to me. So, I'm interested to see what you think about it, though, since the reaction to the show they're not like, most people like it. It's just, I don't think most people like it to the degree I do.
Right. And you know what? I think the same thing about Lupin. It's like, I love the show, but it's like, there's something special about it to me that I don't think a lot of other people are going to appreciate, and we just have to live with that. Like, you can still like the show and enjoy talking with people about it, but there is always going to be that element to a show that is that much more special to you for whatever reason, that it's going to affect everybody differently. It's going to affect everybody differently, not only just because of the show itself, but also like the stage of your life you're in, and all that stuff. Like, for instance, there were aspects of Clannad that definitely hit me harder than they hit you for obvious reasons. But at the same time, it's just like there's the let's say the parenting side with his problems with his dad may have hit you in ways that it didn't hit me. You know what I mean? So there's just, everybody's going to relate to things differently. And I don't think that I don't think you have to worry. I'm sure I'll enjoy the show at the bare minimum.
Yeah, well, I'm not worried about that. It's just, I'm excited that somebody's actually watching it because 90% of the time you ask somebody to watch something and they don't watch it, and that's fair. People got they got to use their time how they want to, but like typically for me, it's like if somebody really wholeheartedly recommends me something, I usually check it out just because, like, fine. If you really think it's this good, it must be at least slightly worth my time.
Right.
And that's actually why I watched, Ichi Killer, because
I didn't even tell you it was good. I just told.
Well, yeah, I know.
I've just been trying to get somebody else to watch it. I've been trying to get Mr. Nice Guy to watch it for at least a year.
Yeah, to be fair, nice guy. I feel like he doesn't. Like, it takes him a while to get to anything, which I
Right.
mean, it's
Yeah.
fine. He's got a lot of stuff to do right now.
I'm not even sure
But
that he would be able to get through it, to be honest.
yeah, that is fair. It doesn't seem like his kind of style either.
Yeah.
But also me and him disagree on pretty much everything when it comes to like works of fiction that we like. Like, what's a good example? I had something recently. It's not Cowboy Bebop because I really like that one, but it's like a lot of the time.
Has he watched
Studio Ghibli movies.
Yeah.
Well, he hasn't watched Clannad.
Yeah,
but,
he's been avoiding,
so for example,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, but for example, Princess Mononoke is like one of his favorite things. And I watched the film and I came out of it and was like, yeah, that was fun, I guess. And that's it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't know why it's so impressive to everybody. In fact, I don't know why any of the Ghibli films are that impressive to anybody because all the ones I've watched, they were just fun. Like, that's it. They're fun films.
Yeah.
But they didn't impact me in any way. But then at the same time, I'll be like, the disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya is the best anime film of all time. And he's just like, Duo, stop it.
Yeah. Well, I think that the one of the reasons why Ghibli has the effect it does on people is partially due to the fact that maybe not for Mr. Nice Guy because he is still a bit younger than I am, but for people my age especially, like I was buying the Ghibli films as they were coming out in the United States, right? And that was a time when, at least as far as movies go, and I actually went to see a bunch of them in the theaters. It was a time when that's all we kind of had, you know what I mean? And I think that it's more special in that regard because it's sort of the only thing, like back in the day, what was available was so much more limited than what there is now that I think that it's partially like a nostalgia or like a, it's a product of its time in regards to how much people like my age really like those movies. But I do agree with you. I think that, like, for instance, my wife really loves Miyazaki's work, and she wants to watch like Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle over and over again. But for me, it's like I would rather watch. In fact, one of my favorite Ghibli films is My Neighbors the Yamadas, which is a really bizarre film by Isao Takahata, may he rest in peace, that is very different from the Miyazaki style, but I guess it gets back to sort of the idea of there's meaning in it. You know what I mean? Like there's meaning to the, it's just, I guess it just hits you in a weird way, but yeah, I agree. And I know that we're way off topic here, but I get what you mean about you and Mr. Nice Guy have a very different taste in anime, especially because you're sort of just getting into anime and he's also kind of, I don't want to say a movie snob, but how do I want to phrase this? Like he's more into anime movies than he is in anime shows, which I think is actually where a major disconnect happens. But going back to what you were saying before about how people will try to get you to watch your favorite thing and not a lot of people will do it. That's actually the reason why I go out of my way, also because I'm a collector. I want to know what when people start communicating with me, like I ask them, like, what's your favorite show? Like, just tell me what it is. I'll get it. I might not be able to watch it right away, for people that I'm like much like that I communicate with, like you, where I'm on a much more personal level. I will try to get to it much more sooner, but like I at least try to buy the shows that people like because at least for me, I guess partially as a collector, so much has changed in the collecting game where back in the day, it's like you didn't buy stuff online. You actually went out and got it from a store, and the hunt or the thrill of the chase or just spending every day that you were shopping, observing what was available was a big part of collecting. And now where there's just this enormous ever-growing catalog that you just can't catch up with, it's better to get the things that mean something to somebody else because then maybe they'll mean something to you too. Because I've seen so much crap that, quite frankly, it's a blur, you know what I mean? And a lot of it is not good. A lot of the anime that's come out over here is not good. And so having those little diamonds in the rough of people who, when they say like, you know what, this is my favorite show. Like I proudly will say, this is my favorite show. having those shows to stumble upon in my collection, because again, this is the only way I watch anime is with what I actually own, for me is a great way to keep the spirit of collecting and enjoying anime alive, because I blind buy just about everything, you know what I mean? And a lot of it, I don't know, like for instance, Watamote, you know, like I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I just got because other people were talking about it, but I still haven't gotten around to watching it. You know what I mean? So anyway, I think we've been going for, oh God, I don't even know how many hours this has been, but it's been quite a long time. So I think if we are done with our discussion on Ichi the Killer and Clannad, let me ask you this. Do you recommend, obviously we would both recommend Clannad. Would you, and I guess you had said Ichi the Killer, it's an experience. You'll agree with me that it's an experience that you would suggest people watch it because it's just, it's an experience you're only going to be able to have once. Is that what we sort of came to?
I mean, kind of, but it'd have to be a very specific type of person that could deal with it.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of people that could deal with it.
Definitely not for everybody. Yeah.
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 It's just like, I think it's an interesting movie from like, it's an experience kind of perspective. But if somebody was actually like, was it a good movie? No, not really. I don't think it was that good of a movie. I also have a question for you, since I think you answered it, but I might as well ask, since this, you always gotta ask this. Did you actually like for real cry in Clannad?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
You know, I mean, I didn't throughout the entire first season. I sort of teared up a little bit at a couple of moments, but it's like it wasn't like it actually really affected me. But like seriously, when Nagisa died, you know, like I was back at the moment when my wife passed out on the operating table. You know, I was there again. So absolutely, I bawled at that scene, you know, and I bawled when Ushio died. It was awful, but at the same time, getting those emotions out there, it's weird because it's sort of like a muscle or an armor, you know, that these cathartic experiences make you stronger and ready to attack life going forward because you've sort of surrogately already dealt with the worst that can happen. You know what I mean? I think that's why these things end up being cathartic.
Yeah, I think it's funny how the two things we watched were almost entirely unrelated, but there were still some small links there that were related.
You know what I found really interesting, actually, is the connection that we've made between Clannad and The Office.
Yeah, that was pretty great.
And it was funny because I didn't interrupt you, but while you were talking, I was like realizing a lot of stuff you were saying, like how long it took. Like they didn't start kissing right away, and I'm like, huh, Jim and Pam, you know, like was that like season 4 or I guess it's season 4 where they finally date, you know, and just all that stuff. No, I totally get it, you know, and I think it's actually really funny that they are such a compatible, like the relationship of Nagisa and Tomoya, and not just in the character of Tomoya being like Jim, but also just like a lot of parallels to that were sort of coming up while you were talking about it that I didn't voice at the time. Anyway, if that's it, then I think we should wrap this up. I appreciate you for doing this with me, and I appreciate everybody who watched. And I think that, like you said, Ichi the Killer is not for everybody, but if you sat through the beginning, you probably know if you're the kind of person who would enjoy it. So I don't think you'd have to worry. It's not like you're gonna get it and then you're not gonna walk into anything if you at least sat through the beginning of our talk.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you remember to like and subscribe and check out Duo's channel if you haven't yet, and we'll catch you next time.